What is up, spooky people? Welcome to another episode of Oddity Acres. Today, we are in Calvary Cemetery, but we're doing something a little bit different. I know we're in a cemetery, but we are doing something different. We're doing a little bit of true crime, a little bit of Mafia history, a little bit of Cleveland history. Lots of very prominent organized crime names came out of the Cleveland area. You got the Lonardo family, the Porrello family, Greene the Irishman, Jack Licavoli, John Scalish, people like that, people that we've read about, people that we've seen in movies, and right now I'm sitting on the family plot of the Lonardos. So stay tuned. This is going to be a fun one. In the 1900s, two Sicilian gangs would come together to form the Cleveland Mafia. One family was the Lonardos, the other family was the Porrellos. By 1920, Joseph Big Joe Lonardo became the head of Cleveland organized crime, and this is his grave. Now at this point, the Cleveland crime family was growing very, very wealthy and very, very strong. They were involved in a lot of illegal rackets, but mainly they were involved in selling sugar to illegal alcohol distributors at the time. There was a way to make money, and especially in the alcohol business, because during that time prohibition was going on, and it was a very, very easy way to make money relatively. Now with all this power and money and wealth came a lot of problems, and in 1926 the Porrello family decided to separate and start their own organized crime family. And this upset the Lonardo family, and in 1927 Joseph Lonardo went to Sicily to speak with the head of the Mafia and the crime bosses there for their help. And when Lonardo came back from Sicily, he was invited for a meetup from Porrello, and he agreed. And that brings us to right here, the family plot of the Porrellos. And on October 13th, 1927, Joseph Lonardo and John Lonardo were killed by Porrello's gunmen at a barbershop during a card game, leaving Porrello to take over the head of the family and inheriting all of the wealth from the sugar industry and the alcohol industry. And here's where they rest. Joseph Lonardo, 1884 to 1927. Next to him, his brother, John Lonardo, 1898 to 1927. And we know that date was October 13th when they were both gunned down. The Lonardo family is buried in section 47, kind of at the top of the hill. You can see them in the back right corner. Now, this wasn't the end of the Lonardo crime family. In fact, the loyalists and people that were still loyal to that family joined groups with Frank Milano, and he was part of the Mayfield Road mob, and was also affiliated with the Jewish Purple Gang. And together, they went to war against the Porrellos. And wouldn't you know it, on July 5th, 1930, Porrello was killed during a sit-down with Milano. And the new boss, his predecessor, Vincenzo Porrello, was assassinated 3 weeks later. And you can see at the bottom, Giuseppe, aka Big Joe, who was killed in the Venetian restaurant by Frank Milano and his men, and his predecessor, Vincenzo, who died 3 weeks later. Now with Porrello, when he was murdered in the restaurant by orders from Frank Milano, was his bodyguard and associate, Sam Tilocco, who happens to be buried in the family plot next to him. And in 1931, Milano led the family into the National Crime Syndicate. And in 1932, they became a member of the Commission. Now, the commission was an American governing body of the Mafia in the United States, and it was founded by Lucky Luciano in 1931. Primarily, it was the 5 head Mafia bodies of New York City and the Chicago outfit as well. Fast forwarding a little bit ahead, in 1932, Milano had the rest of the Porrello family murdered, and he remained boss until 1935 when he fled to Mexico for tax evasion charges. Now, at that point, Cleveland crime family needed a boss, and Alfred Polizzi took over until he retired in 1944. Next enters the big name in Cleveland Mafia history. John T Scalish took over and began his 32-year reign as the Cleveland mob boss. Check this out. Now, in a lot of people's opinions, this is when the Cleveland Mafia really started to flourish. John Scalish started to build alliances, in his 32 years as the boss, and expanded well into California and Florida and Las Vegas. Now, John Scalish had a lot of ties with Las Vegas, doing casino shakedowns at the Stardust and even taking over the Desert Inn from Bugsy Siegel. And in the 1950s, the Cleveland Mafia was flourishing. It was at its peak. It did start to decline come into the 1970s because John didn't initiate a lot of new members. Now, during Scalish's time as the head of the Cleveland Mafia, he had complete control of the Teamsters Union, and he forged very strong ties and alliances between the Italian and the Jewish underworlds and gained substantial amounts of illicit money. Now, on May 26, 1976, John T. Scalish died in the hospital during heart surgery. And he was buried here in Calvary Cemetery in the family plot. At this point, a full-scale war broke out over who would be taking over the Cleveland racketeering, and that would be one James T. Licavoli. And we know that name because this is the start of the Italian-Irish warfare that happened in Cleveland between Danny Greene and Licavoli. And the Scalish family plot is right at the top, almost at the entrance in section 35. You should be able to see them from the roadway. So after the death of John Scalish in 1976, James T. Licavoli will take over the Cleveland crime family and go to war with a very famous Irishman named Danny Greene.
James Licavoli and John Calandra emerged from the rear door of the federal courthouse where TV5 photographer Rich Geiser was stationed. James Licavoli and John Calandra left the federal courthouse an hour after they were convicted on racketeering charges. Judge William Thomas allowed the 2 reputed mafia leaders to continue the bond set for them at the beginning of their trial.
Because I'm in between both worlds, a square world and a street world, and I think I have trust from both sides. But I have no axe to grind, but if somebody wants to come after me, we're over here by the Celtic Club. I'm not hard to find.
And wouldn't you know it, Danny Greene is buried in this cemetery as well. He has a family plot here. His name is not marked or mentioned, but he was cremated and buried here with his mother. Check it out. This is Danny Greene's family plot. And Irene is his mother. This is where Danny Greene rests. This is his final resting place. There's so much local legend and lore around Danny Greene. He's almost, in a lot of people's eyes, a superhero. When you have movies made about you and all that stuff, it's crazy, but there's a lot of violence going on in the city around that time. The Irish Mafia and the Italian Mafias were battling against each other. Cleveland was known as the car bomb capital of the world. There was explosions every day, and in 1977, that's what finally killed Danny Greene. Now, Licavoli did end up going to jail for Greene's murder in 1982, and his successor as boss, Angelo Lonardo, also went to prison in 1984.
The man behind the screen is Angelo Lonardo, former underboss for the Cleveland Mafia. Lonardo told Senator Sam Nunn the Cleveland Mafia family ruled the International Brotherhood of Teamsters.
What benefits did the Cleveland family derive from their control of the Teamsters Union?
Well, they used to get favors through the pension fund, for loans, for casinos.
You're saying a number of the delegates who elect the highest officer in the Teamsters Union are basically controlled by La Cosa Nostra?
That's right.
And they will elect whoever La Cosa Nostra chooses.
Yes.
That really marks the end of, you know, the mafia in Cleveland for most people. I mean, obviously there's organized crime everywhere and things like that will still exist to the end of time. But at that point, you know, once, you know, they ended up in prison, by the 1990s, all the living members were in prison. There was nobody alive outside of prison, and the mob just kind of disintegrated. In the Cleveland area, that is. I mean, obviously it's much more prominent in places like Chicago and New York City and Vegas and things like that. But the height of organized crime in Cleveland kind of came to a collapse at that point. It is incredibly interesting, though, to be sitting here in Danny Greene's family plot. For those of you that are curious too, Danny Greene and his family plot is in section 10 of the Calvary Cemetery. Pretty close to the front, right behind this large monument that says Cowley. Now, I have just briefly touched the surface of Cleveland organized crime and all the players that were part of it. We kind of hit some of the big names, talked about some of the bigger stories, and kind of gave you the really rough outline of 1900 to 1990. But as I said, there's a lot of other key players that I didn't mention, that I didn't have time to mention. You know, there's a lot of different side stories and things like that that play an important role. But I encourage you to do your own research, because it's kind of fun to take a roll down this hill, this history hill, and gain all this knowledge on the way down. So, as I said, this is Calvary Cemetery. This is where most, not all, but most of the Cleveland Mafia members and organized crime members are buried. If you guys are interested, I can leave section numbers and stuff down there in the bottom for you. So in case you guys want to come out and pay your respects and see these individuals' final resting places, you can. But again, I want to thank you so much for watching another episode of Oddity Acres. If you haven't gotten a chance yet, please like and subscribe. It really helps out the channel, it helps out the video, and it lets me know that you like what I'm doing and you like the videos and the content I'm creating. That way I can make more of what you guys like to see. So again, you guys are the best. Thank you so much for checking out the channel and watching the videos. Leave a comment, say hello, and we'll talk to you next time on another episode of Oddity Acres. Stay scared and happy Halloween.